Hello, my name is David Bryan, and this is Curiosity Invited, a podcast inspired by endless curiosity. Tune in for an open-minded conversation about interesting and important things. Hello, and welcome to Curiosity Invited. My name is David Bryan, and what you're about to see is a conversation I had with Jennifer Lehr. Jennifer Lehr is a therapist who's been working with individuals and couples for over 20 years. She is a writer, book soon to be published this coming year, I believe. She is an active participant in 3 blogs, one being a healing tips blog, her WeConcile blog, and Jennifer's blog, and I'll put all those in the description. And she is the primary author and co-founder of WeConcile, which is a website that, as you will hear in our conversation, a website to make more accessible good therapeutic work for building great relationships, not just marriages or romantic relationships, but relationships among any people. And Jennifer is an expansive thinker, really quick and facile mind, who is courageous enough to think about all sorts of things. Never feels compelled to color within the lines only. So I had a wonderful conversation, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Well, I'm very happy to be speaking with Jennifer Lehr. Jennifer Lehr, who's someone I know. I should tell you that in advance, Jennifer. Jennifer's a good friend of my wife, and but also an incredibly interesting person. She is a psychotherapist, has been for years. She's done clinical work. I know you do work with couples, but you also do work with individuals, as I recall. Mm-hmm. And 2 other things that I would mention right now, although I suspect we'll get into all sorts of different things if you're willing. But Jennifer developed, is in the process of refining a website called WeConcile, which is an online couples or relationship counseling software to bring access to that sort of service the world over. And we can talk about that, I know. And you're also a recent author of a book soon to be put out there. And I'm hoping we can talk about that and all sorts of things. But how would you describe your bio? What would you have said about you?
Well, I learned a few things from your wife, Shelley, about how to describe oneself, because she never puts herself in a box.
No, that's true.
She's, the soul becoming, or, she has a great ways of doing things. And I looked at one of her early websites. I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of that? But so the soul becoming. But anyway, so I've got some boxes that I fit into. One of them is I do write. What were you going to say, David?
No. I'm just getting things are beeping, so I'm shutting them off.
Oh, no beeping. Okay. So WeConcile is becoming an app, which hopefully will get released in this month.
Oh, wow.
Fabulous. Yeah, it should have gotten released already, but lots of bugs, I guess, come up when you do apps, and we're in the getting rid of the bugs, and then we'll do a soft release, and then we've got a few more things to put into it, and then we'll do a harder release. But
that's great.
And that is just a app to help people. Well, first of all, if you're in a relational fight and dysregulated, you need to get your feet back under you. So it's got an emergency area.
Will you remember to we'll put up any website or whatever stuff we'll put in the description when we post it. When we
Okay.
post the website. But
Okay, cool.
yes, because that would be great for people to be able to find WeConcile, et
Yeah.
cetera.
So that's, I got the idea for that in 2007, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And it gestated for a few years before I had the light bulb of how we would start doing it. And so it's been a long, unrewarding process in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, having done some of that with a couple of tech companies, it's that process of giving birth to, it's, the idea is just the beginning.
The idea is
as you've discovered.
Yeah. So I had this idea. Now I'm like, why did I have that idea? I could have avoided this whole path. But anyway, it's been a very enriching path for me personally, because it helped me work out my relationship with my second husband. Because go ahead. I gave you
no, please. That's okay. I don't want to cut you off. I was going to say, well, helped you work out your relationship with your second husband, and you became a psychotherapist before that. LMFT, right?
Yeah.
And but what brought you there? Like, what's the circuitous path that said, what, when I grow up, I want to be
this is a great
I want to be
story.
one of those.
Yeah. This is a really great story. And you're going to you'll probably get some amusement out of it, because it's going to go right into your weak spot.
I have so many.
Well, you have one, maybe two. Anyway, so when I was little, I wanted to be a vet. I wanted to be a ballerina. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a photographer. There's some things I wanted to be, but obviously, so then I went through high school, and I was not a good learner in high school. I thought I was the dumbest one in my family, and I come from a very, very, very brilliant family, and I was the dumb one. And like my brother and sister got straight A's without even opening a book through their whole high school. And then my other brother went to Georgia Tech, and then got a full ride to Stanford for his PhD. I mean, just very smart. Well, Shelley's very smart too, and so are you, but I was the dumb one. So that was my little identity. And I didn't realize I had a brain for a long time, a brain that worked. And I actually don't think my brain worked very well when I was younger. I'm not sure what was going on there. I have some theories, which we probably shouldn't get into right now. We'll go down another circuitous path. Yeah. So anyway, I ended up going to school for a year for biology, because I wanted to be a vet, but I hated chemistry and I hated dissecting. And I was depressed. So I went back home for a few months and took some classes at the local college, and you
grew up back east, right? You grew up in Pennsylvania.
Northeastern Pennsylvania.
Yeah, which is really, it's not the Pennsylvania people think of when they say Pennsylvania.
No, they think of Philadelphia or No, I grew up in corn and cow country. Yeah. So like, I think most of the people, I remember hearing this, most of the people in the area I grew up hadn't been more than 50 miles from where they were born. So just, it was an insular sort of area where people farmed, and, down, salt of the earth, people. And, but I didn't fit in. So anyway, I went back to school for another semester for writing. And in the process of writing, I realized I wanted to go to art school. So I followed my sister to Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia. And much to her dismay, because she didn't want me following her there. Anyway, I did 4.5 years there, no degree. It was a studio school. And then I bumped around. I did photography. I waited tables. I did photography. Went back to school for film for a year. I moved to New York City and got into the film business. I got into the camera department. I got into the union. I came out to LA. And then this is the part where you're going to get a little enjoyment. So I started working with, someone gave me a deck of tarot cards, and I started playing with the tarot cards. And I was like, I could see stories. You lay them out. Oh, that's that story. I could see how the story related to the person. And I was in therapy at some point when I was in therapy. So I was doing more digging into my own story. And I realized, as much as I loved beautiful images, I'd been doing some low budget cinematography. I shot a movie which is out on DVD somewhere. Anyway, I shot a low budget movie, you know, with car crashes and explosions and all that stuff. So I was like, I just was like, I like the internal story better than this putting out a product, which might not even be a good product. And I somehow moved myself, because when I was on a cusp at one point when I left art of photography versus therapy, and I went to the photography route. That's when I went to film school. And then I hit the cusp again, except for this time
wait, slow down and tell me the overlap between playing with tarot cards and therapy.
So
was that immediately apparent to you, or
no,
is that what you thought you were doing when you were playing with it?
no, I was just playing with them. They were fun. They had interesting archetypal images and and what is the sun card, like, or the moon card, which is, going through a period of unconscious, feeling your way through something, but not being able to see what you're dealing. So psychological states, images.
When you talk about this, and I hope we can dig into this piece later on down the road, because I want to make sure we talk about WeConcile, and I want to make sure we talk about the book.
Yeah.
But I'm really fascinated by this following question. When you were seeing in the tarot cards the story of the people you were playing with,
Right.
Did you see that seeing? Did you think what you were seeing was metaphorical, or did you think you were, or were you seeing things about their personality? Were you using the pictures of did it matter what card, or do you think it would have mattered what cards they picked, or would you, because that's the way you think, have been able to see a connection between whatever card they picked and their personality, because you're so attuned to people's personalities, people's psychological states?
Well, the cards gave me a stepstone to the states. I think now at this point, I started working with cards when I was 25, and now I'm 61. So it's been I've worked with cards for a long time, though I don't work with them so much anymore. So I'm going to give you a concrete example again, and then we can go a little bit more conceptual.
Yeah.
So we'll take the moon card. I put down a reading for myself, because when you work with yourself, you learn all this stuff that you can then apply to other people. So I pulled some cards, and the moon card's there. I'm like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, this card means you're in the unconscious, and you are on a path, but you're feeling things, but you don't know, you can't see. There's no clear sight. And then of course I applied that myself. Well, yeah, that's exactly where I am. I don't know what the hell I'm doing right now, and I'm in my life. And so you start learning these pieces of what would I call them? States, psychological states of being. And you start applying them to yourself. And then when you sit with someone else and you lay down the cards, you go, oh, because you're working with people you don't know. Right. You can't just see it. Although sometimes someone would come in, a new client, and I would see a picture right in front of me of they'd say 5 words, and I'd see the whole, like, oh, that's what they're dealing with. But let's suppose they pulled out, suppose we pulled the devil, the 3 of Swords, and the Tower. Those are 3 extremely difficult cards. I would immediately know this is a person who was caught in some kind of bondage, whether it was sexual or energetic or addictive.
So, but let me get this straight. So, the cards they pulled,
or I pulled for them,
or you pulled for them, you see that as indicative of what's going on with them, rather than you use whatever card to see who that person is, or see aspects of that person because they're responding to, like, this card's about the unconscious, and they're giving you some response. I guess I'm asking if your relationship with those cards, or if the way you think about those cards are, that there's something, for lack of a better term, that there's some hocus pocus going on that that is outside of you and that person. That is
Yes.
the
So
latter. Yes.
you know Jung's theory of synchronicity, correct?
Yes.
You do.
Yeah. You don't ask me to
Say it.
tell about it.
But
Yeah.
you know, it's that there's bigger forces moving and things
Right.
pop. You know, someone in our grad class, Larry in our grad class did a diagram, and it was like a seesaw that was underground, and when the events, it would push one side up and it would pop into awareness or the other, but it was all connected. It was an underground structure that you couldn't see what was happening till some event happened that caused something to pop into awareness. And it's sort of that kind of based on, so yeah, there, I'm not there is synchronicity where, you know, reading cards is a weird thing where, you know, you lay down the cards. Well, why did that card show up and not another card? I didn't, you know, how did you shuffle it? Like, you have to sort of trust. There's a big piece of trust that what shows up has a reason to show up, and you just go with it.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, we, and you know this, like you and I live in very different places about that.
Yes.
I don't see what you're saying as nonsense. I don't see it as that's impossible. I can be curious about that, right? But my inclination is not to see, I wouldn't speak about it that way. I would come up with some story about, well, look, there are people who are sensitive in varieties of different ways. Some probably easily explained, and some not so easily explained.
Right.
That they're sensitive in all those ways, and that those people would be able to use any card that shows up. That's
true.
To gain insight into what's going on in a human being.
That's true.
And that's, you know, that tends to be where I go.
Right. Well, this is really interesting. Okay. So before coming into this video call with you, my brain went, oh, this is going to be about intuition versus science. We'll see. That just popped up. So,
and I don't see them as, just to be clear,
they're integrated.
It's less of verses.
It's not a verses.
Verses to me. Yeah. It is. They are related, but they are very different. And I think anybody who is any real scientist knows that things pop up.
Right.
Like, where do ideas come from?
Exactly. And also based on what you said just earlier, like, you could look at any card. Well, you know,
I couldn't, but you could.
I could. And so I'm teaching my stepdaughter who has a very strong psychic part of her. I'm teaching her to work with the tarot cards, to use them, to have a way to find language for some of the stuff she feels that she can't express.
Oh, okay. So tell me what you mean when you say psychic.
And
I'm not trying to pin you down. I'm really not.
She will get an image and know what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, that level of psychic. I channel more than I would say I was psychic. I would say I have the ability to channel, like, you know, when you're writing and ideas come through, that's channeling. So, and many people can do that, even though they don't recognize it. You do that, I'm sure, when you're writing. We can have a whole nother conversation about that another time.
I actually, I mean, that would be an interesting conversation, right? It's consciousness generally. I mean, I think anybody who,
but wait,
I think people who pay attention to it a lot, find out that ideas come from nowhere and go places that are mysterious anyway. And so go ahead.
But we have to get back to your question.
Oh yeah.
So, different types. So I'm teaching helping, working with her, however the word is. I wouldn't say I'm teaching her, but I'm helping her. And as I'm working and we're processing the cards and relating them to ourselves, because that's how you learn. How do I relate to this card? What does that card mean to me? As we're doing that, and what is the meaning of this card and how do I relate to it, both. So as we're doing that, I've become aware that there's this deck we're using, the language is not addressing some of what I want to communicate. So I've come to realize, oh, I'm gonna have to make my own deck with a whole different language. And there are many decks out there. There's traditional tarot, and then there's decks called like the wisdom cards or the this cards or the that cards. And people have, but I'm working with internal parts. You know, you have the anxious part, you have the part that sees, you have the part that the gatekeeper that keeps things away, you have the part that's over logical. I mean, there's these parts that we all have. And I'm realizing as I work with this particular person or certain people, I need a repertoire of parts to talk about so that they can go in and look at themselves in a deeper way. And we aren't just caught in a language that was created, you know, in the 1500s or whenever it was, that doesn't address everything. So when you say, are you looking at, is it the card? You could look at any deck or any card. Yes and no, because different cards have different languages. There's a deck. There's a deck out there that somebody told me about recently. I went and looked online, looked, it's not being, you can buy it used, but I forget the name of it, but has a picture of a house and a picture of a tree and a picture of a ball. I'm looking at going, how the heck would somebody read those? But somebody who's read the book and worked with those symbols is going to put it down and they're going to get images and they'll go, oh, da, 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 da.
I may have that. I may actually have that deck.
You might.
I actually may have that deck. I think it was called Star. It was a game. It was part of a game. Really? It was called Stargazer. And I never used them for the game. I don't know how to play the game, but I used them with kids, and you know, there's like pick 3 cards that say that represent how you're feeling or something, and they were so powerful because they were so simple. There was nothing. Yeah, there was no big story in them, so the story came from the person. Right. Yeah. So there's, you know, we just entered into a world where there's so many ways to do so many things with. You know, an image and a person. Yeah, indeed. You know, yeah. So, okay. So, I don't know how we got to where we got, but I'm so glad we got there. But now back up. All right. So, you know, you left the world of cameras and movies and did what? And went to, you decided you want to go to school for? I went to grad school. Grad school. I had actually, so I'm 38, 37 maybe. I pulled I had credits all across, scattered across the USA, you know, and, but I didn't have a bachelor's. So I went to Antioch, and I think it was I think I had to do 3 quarters to pull together my, so less than a year. And I got my bachelor's, and I looked at a list of grad schools, and my eye went to a specific one, a grad schools for psychology, and I didn't know anything about it. I said, that's where I'm going. It's the only one I applied to, and that's where I went. So, and that was Pacifica. Which was what? That was Pacifica, where Shelley went. California. Right. So yeah. So anyway, that's how I got there. And then of course it's a whole new journey. So would you be able to look back and say what was attractive about it, or no? It just was really, that was the intuitive hit. That was where, but you stayed. You stayed. It was a complete intuitive hit, because I looked at the list and I'm like, oh, that. And then I went for the interview. I'm like, oh, and then I loved that school. It was, I was going to say, but then it fed you. Oh my God, it was perfect. It was the perfect place for me. Yeah. So the other schools were more, they just didn't have the depth, you know, Pacifica's depth oriented. So it was really, really. And so say what that means, say depth, talk about what the depth psychology, not, you know, just depth. Yeah. Well, psychology is, and then is that how you work with people? When you do you still practice? I'm not practicing right now. When you do practice, when you did practice and when you do practice, is it a particular way of working with people that, well, say something about that? Yeah. So that's such a hard question. I know. It is. That's why I'm asking. Well, let me ask you first. I want to ask you first. You've had some therapy, right?
You don't have to answer if you don't want
I
to.
don't know the answer to that question. I guess so. I've gone to, yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, I did. Yeah, I went to
And
a somebody.
and was that somebody? How did
She
that?
was a she was a she was a she was a psychotherapist. She was not. I don't think she was Jungian, but she was. She probably was Freudian. Her name was. I probably shouldn't say her name, but from LA. Is that
How did she work with you? How did you find? Did you work in the head? Did you work in the body? Did you work with images? How did you work?
I was supposed to speak.
You were.
I was supposed to speak,
So
and
she was a silent witness sort of thing.
largely, and I
Freudian
mean, it
view.
was terrible. I mean, I
Oh,
will say, it was. It really was because. I mean, probably this probably won't surprise you, but I, I couldn't get past the idea that wait, I'm supposed to talk to this person about stuff that's going on inside of me, even though I know the only reason this woman is listening to me is because I'm paying her.
well,
And
see, okay, this is a huge dilemma. Except for, and maybe that was true in your case, but most people, many, let's say, not say most, let's say some people who become therapists do it because they love helping people and then they
yeah,
make money in the process.
yeah.
So it
Well,
isn't complete, like, I mean, if
she
you really
may
want to make money, you're not going to be a therapist.
no, she may have, but she may have that may have been her approach, but it
It may have
certainly
been.
wasn't.
Yeah.
It certainly it certainly
Yeah.
wasn't me.
Well,
I
you
mean,
didn't have a
it was
relationship.
not exactly. I had no relationship with her.
Right.
I
I
would.
know.
So it really was. From my point of view, it was not successful. I don't know if it was successful from her point of view.
So when I used to work with kids, and we're on another slight diversion here, but when I used to
Yeah.
work with kids, I worked at this school in the Valley, LA, in San Fernando Valley, and I worked at a couple schools, but one of them was for kids that, were teenagers and they weren't making it. They had emotional, social, behavioral problems. And the supervisor, whose name I don't remember, so I don't have to throw him under the bus, but I couldn't stand him. Anyway, he wanted us to sit in a room and get these kids to talk. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I took them on walks. I told them stories. I told them about myself. We played games. And eventually they would talk.
Yeah.
But I created a relationship because
Sure.
they weren't going to talk to some strange woman who was 20 years older than them, 30 years older than them. And
Because they had to.
because they already were like, completely renegades.
Yeah.
You tell them what to do, they're going to do the opposite. So forget it. So anyway, that's just a story to help you. Anyway, so back to types of therapy. Depth. What is depth therapy?
Yeah.
I think depth therapy allows for mystery. It isn't just 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + A + heart + dog = your story. I mean, it's just it's a bigger basket with more things in it. It's not, well, I have an eating disorder because I'm I'm anxious and I don't like myself. Well, yeah, that's part of it, but there's more going on there. There's a lot more, and it gets into the what is the fabric of your being? Why are you here? What is your purpose? What do you care about? Why do you want to kill yourself? What is killing you? Are you killing yourself to save your family? What is going on? It's to me, a bigger, deeper place than straight.
And that's how you worked with people when they knocked on your door and came to your office?
Well,
that was the you that was there.
That was you that was there, but I worked with different people differently according to what walked into my office, what they needed, what got triggered in me, what my intuition told me to do, even what I was reading at the moment and being influenced by. All that stuff comes right into it. Yeah.
And so you've developed this software that is specifically for relationships, couples, or
individuals are going to be able to use it too. We've loosened it so that it will work with individuals as well.
Right. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And are there aspects of, were you able to your satisfaction, whatever satisfaction could mean, right? But were you able, especially when it comes to software, but were you able to build into that a level of an invitation toward the depth that you think is useful for people to work with, or because it's online or in some sort of way, is it much thinner than that, much more shallow than depth?
Right. Yeah, no, I gotcha. The trouble with depth, and it does have depth in it in various places. There's exercises that ask you to look at inner parts, or, there's things, but a lot of depth is inner exploration. So it gets you on the path of inner exploration, but of course you can always go much further than it opens the door. It isn't it gives answers in terms of, it's a tricky question because, we're in a world with no relational training. We, go out into relationships and basically live by what we've learned growing up. And I don't mean learning, implicit learning, just stuff, we're living out actions and enactments based on what we went through ourselves. It's not like we're going, oh, this is what I should do in this situation, or, oh yes, I'm really upset and I know how to regulate myself and reach to my partner so my partner is regulated now too. That stuff isn't taught. So it is not depth in the sense of Jungian and getting into dreams and, all that kind of stuff, but there is depth in terms, it does set you a foundation. And there are things to start opening you into curiosity and self-questioning. And that's where depth comes from. So it opens a door to it. It's not mired in it because it can't be as the tool it is. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that makes actually lots of sense. It's and so it's not, this is a question. It's not a substitute for, if somebody wants to, it's not a substitute for the living human being who could invite somebody into those things in a way that is.
It's not a substitute for but here's an interesting thing. So when I was younger, let's say I really got into, when I was 29, I got into a relationship with somebody who was an addict. And it was not a good relationship, but it got me into the 12-step program, which was good for me at the time. I needed all that, all the tools that they offered. But at that time, I was doing all my work myself. I wasn't in an
when you say work, when you say work there, you mean all your psychological work,
right? Was internal.
Doing yourself, right?
I was doing a lot of internal work. I was, doing exercises and reading books and processing and journaling and It wasn't until I was much, much older that I did training, and I went to the Saturday Center, as you know, where I met Shelley, and I also did 4 years of relational Gestalt training at the Gestalt Institute in LA, GTI LA, PGI of GTI. Anyway, that's when I learned how you actually create a relation, how you work on yourself within relationship to other. So I got into therapy, interning as a therapist, blah, blah, blah. And I already was very good because of all the internal work I did, but I didn't have the relational piece. The relational piece is different. So learning about all my parts is different than relating to you. And so those are two different pieces that I think are both really important. And I got that one first, and then I got the second one. Now, how this relates to what you asked me a moment ago, I don't remember, but I know it does.
Well, yeah, it does. I think it does. It's also where I went with that is that it's interesting. The two things when we first talked about doing this, or talked, my fingers were on a keyboard about doing this. There's WeConcile, this software, this that will be available, and there's this book that you wrote, and one is focused on, well, I get that WeConcile will have an individual possibility, but one is focused on couples, and one is as I understand it, and from the piece you gave me to read, one is focused on deep individual work.
Yeah.
Although Well, I don't know. We can talk about that book in a second. So that's interesting that those are the big juicy projects you are
It
working
is
on.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, one is very, so WeConcile is much more skill oriented,
Yes.
teach people how to think, how to do, how to
Yes.
understand. And the book is, so I started writing, I've been writing since I was a little kid, and I've gone through chapters where I've written a lot and chapters where I haven't written much. And when I was in LA, I don't know what year it was, but I started going to a monthly writing group with a woman who used to teach at the Chadwick School in Palos Verdes. And or she was a teacher or administrator. Anyway, she was a wonderful woman. She's dead now. And she had a monthly writing a group in Redondo Beach. And I'd drive down there every month and sit for a couple hours. And she'd have words in a bowl and we'd pull the words out and make sentences. And it took off into writing. And she really got me going in the writing. And that was, so I've had over the years, many, notebooks and computers full of writing. I've never done anything with it. And now this is the part you're going to find interesting. So I do a psychic reading every once in a while with different people for the fun of it. And because I often hear things that are interesting for me.
A psychic reading for you or a psychic reading for them?
For me. I hire someone periodically for psychic reading because I enjoy them. I like to hear what people see. And it's, and then of course you have to, the work you have to do is, what part of me resonates with it and what part of me says, which is always what you have to do if you're dealing with anything that doesn't emerge from yourself. You have to learn how to go, yes, no, maybe. And if you don't, you get blown into someone else's, vision of what might be completely ridiculous. Right. Anyway, one of the things this woman said to me is she said, I see that your soul wants to write a book. Now I've wanted to write a book my whole life, a good book. And I got caught in WeConcile, been, slave to WeConcile for 10 years, let's say. So here's slave Jennifer, who wants to do this other thing also, who hasn't given herself time. And this woman says, I see that your soul wants to write a book. And I went away and said, oh, I have to make time to do this. And so I started 2 hours every day, hour and a half to 2 hours, 6 to 7 days a week. I sat down and I went through all my old writing. I pulled out pieces. I started, and I didn't know what I was writing. I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't know. And then of course it turns out to be called I Am Witch. Now, that didn't come till the book was near, close to done before I realized what I was doing. So we'll get into that. I know the title's a bit.
Well, how do you see it? Yeah, go ahead. No, tell me. Say the rest. Say the rest.
So so I Am Witch, the Art of Becoming. So I was, so I started putting these pieces together. Some of them I've already written, and they were about my depth journey, how I moved in and situations I'd been trapped in, what I had to build in myself to get myself out of them, to move through them. Just about and so it's, essentially a memoir, though it's not exactly a memoir.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you that question. So, recognizing the limitations of those categories, of whatever those categories are, but do you see this as a memoir? Do you see this as a self-help book? Do you see this as what is this?
It's a combination. I don't know how you feel about the word spiritual.
That was another one of the things on my on my notepad. Was like, I'm going to make sure that Jennifer talks about what she means by the word spiritual. Yeah. So use the word as if I understand what you're meaning, and then we can talk about it.
Okay. So it's a spiritual journey of becoming. I started as this very crippled girl. I really had no facility to survive in the outer world. I didn't know what was going to happen to me, but I couldn't say no. I was really crippled in my childhood. So I come out into the world and I, pick a drug addict for a boyfriend. Well,
and you tell that story in the book of how you became a crippled person.
I don't explain it all. Mm-hmm. I explain bits and pieces. I also tie in it's try not to get in too deep before we cover some more ground.
Yeah.
So let me go back to spiritual, maybe.
Sure. Yeah.
When I was 30, I did a little bit of work with, and this is when I was living in Hell's Kitchen in New York. I did a little bit of work with a woman who, very little work. Maybe I saw her 3 sessions, 2 through 3 sessions. And she wasn't a therapist. She was a healer. Or she's already outside the box. And I did a little work with her around parts. Now parts are, and we can figure out parts really quick. I know you have a logical part. You have a very functional part that goes out in the world. You have a part that probably is very questioning. You have a part that probably is like, I don't think so. You got different parts, different voices.
Sure.
And if you get triggered, a certain part might come up to take care of the situation. So I started work. So like, I know somebody who had a very traumatic childhood, and she'll get murderous when she's triggered a certain way, because if she doesn't kill you, you might kill her. So, you see how these parts come up. Mm-hmm. So I started working with, I sat down, I wrote, I believe I had 16 parts identified, from anxiety, the one up on the ceiling going, what do I do, to, so one of the parts that came through at that time was the spirit, the wisdom part. And when I was writing about that part, defining who it is, what it wanted, how it protected me, blah, 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 I saw the image of the Egyptian eye. It just came up. So, and that part is is a part that sees. So that would be the intuitive part. And to me, spirituality is connected to more than the 5 senses. So, you've got radio waves that you can't see, but they exist. There is more than meets the eye. And the spiritual part is connected not just to survival. Survival is where we all live. I'm going to kill you so I can eat the corn, and you're going to, have to go somewhere else. Or the part that has enough vision to be generous, to say that qualities, courage, persistence, all these higher qualities are more important than survival. And to me, spiritual has to do with that. It has to do with qualities that we can develop or gain access to, and to get us out of straight the 5 senses survival reality.
So when you use the term, it does not necessarily have, there's a question, a religious,
no,
or it's not about God in the sky,
first of all, I never believed about God in the sky. I
Right.
do believe there's a force that causes the bud to bloom, and there is a
Sure.
life force, and
Right.
and there may be a God who, it's possible there's a God.
Sure.
I'm not saying there isn't.
No.
There probably is a God, but it isn't a man in the sky.
Right.
That I'm pretty convinced.
Yeah.
So you'd have a lot of trouble pushing me in that.
Well, whatever. But it's not the man part. It's, there, right there. For some people, it clearly is. But it's a much bigger category for you. Spiritual is a much bigger category for you than a deity that is somehow all-seeing and pulling us in some direction that we are either aware of or subject to.
Yeah, I think it's more. Did you ever read who wrote it? Power versus Force?
No.
So I forget the author's name. Anyway, he talks about the energy levels moving from shame, I believe, is the lowest, to joy, probably the highest, and each feeling has a vibration. So if you're in shame, you're cut off from all kinds of things. If you're in joy, you're open to all kinds of things. And so when to me, spiritual means, or God means, and I think we are all mini gods trying to co-create, trying to become, hopefully, the most we can be, to bring as much peace or harmony, or to bring in higher qualities. Mm-hmm. Of course, why you started a school and helped kids, learn. You don't want a bunch of, problems on the street. You want people who can contribute to a good society or whatever. Sure. So for me, God and spiritual connect to becoming the most we can be. And I don't mean in an egotistic ego way.
Right.
I mean, in a, are you kind? Do you have compassion? Are you generous? Do you see the world through the eyes of abundance? Are you stuck in, and So anyway, that's my little speech on that.
Yeah. Okay. But you were so your book,
The book.
I Am Which, is a spiritual journey.
It
Or
is
it's a story of your spiritual journey.
it is a it is not a linear story. It is a bunch of stories that hold together, that show a journey and show different states of being and show moving through different states of being and evolving from basically trapped to who I am now.
And at some point in this process, I'm curious about the writing of it. So it began with you, sort of kneading the dough buried in your writing over the years. And at some point it emerged into something. And at some point, did you realize, this is the kind of thing I'm writing. I'm writing a book that.
Right. So I started putting together old pieces and linking them, which means I had to do a lot of new writing, because you can't just have a bunch of separate pieces laying there and expect it to be cohesive. Yeah. So I had a lot to do to link it. And as I was writing, I became aware of how much of the book was about me learning the spiritual, about me, my intuition, about how I work with people, about how I use healing, about what I taught when I was running groups, and so much of the book became about, the part of me that doesn't live in the logical world, but lives in the world of magic, where you can have a vision and you can create it. To me, that's magic. And it isn't magic in the, woo-woo sense. It's magic in the vision pulls you into a creation. And so as I wrote, I realized, and then at some point, I realized that, and I don't know why the word witch came through, but it did, because it's such a pejorative, we've taken that word and just,
I was wondering, that, I've only read that little piece, right, that you sent me.
That Mike sent you? Did Mike send you that piece? No, the piece I sent you. I don't remember.
You sent me.
Did I send you chapter 2 or not?
Chapter 2.
Okay, yeah.
And that I ended up curious about, why are you calling this witch? I am witch. Did you choose that word to entice people? Or is this going to end up being a story about you becoming a witch, whatever, but witch does not mean
right. Okay. So
it's not not the Wiccan religion, or it is, or it's, so tell us.
So the chapter you got got a little less witch in it than some of the other chapters, just so you know. There are chapters that are have more witch. So they vary. But what let me think for a second. My brain is going, where should I go here?
Yeah, well, let's just be,
when I was
the expression curious together.
Back in the day, 2007, when your poor not yet wife, I don't think you got married till the next year or two, was doing the soul memory discovery training with me.
2008, yes.
Oh, yes. Remember that? Yeah, and you were having a little trouble with that at the time. But anyway, it was a really interesting training, I have to tell you. Anyway, back when I did that, after I learned that training, I did some work, mostly for free on Friends, because that kind of work left me with a splitting headache. That kind of level of channeling, because it's bringing in information. It was really hard for me. I could do it, but it was hard. So but I worked with some friends. A lot of them were therapists, and did a session each on them. And what happened, so this is another interesting story. So when you do that work at that time, I think the work's changed now, but at that time, you would look for stories that tied into the current story, and they were often past life stories or metaphors, whether they're real or not. We'll call them metaphors, because
well, wait, do you call them metaphors? Do you think of them as metaphors, or do you think they're real?
I think both. I give room that they could be either or. I don't need to know. Again, trust. I don't need to know.
Got it.
It could be true or not.
Yeah.
I don't always know. But I had a bunch of women come in, let's say there were 8, and they all had been burned, thrown in wells, in trials, whatever, for being witches. And when that kind of thing happens, you start going, when you get a group of clients that come in with the same issue, you start going, okay, what is this about me? And that's when I started realizing that I probably had a past life at some point where I was accused as a witch and something happened. And that's if you believe in past lives.
But I want to, yes, I understand that. And do you believe in past lives?
I have moved more strongly.
And does it matter?
Right? It doesn't matter because it could be an inner metaphor. You know, who knows why we have the stories we have inside us.
Great.
Wonderful. But I'm going to, for now, go literal and take it as a past life, even though who knows. So that was my first reckoning with, oh, this is, and the kind of work I did with the soul memory, some of the kind of work I did was I would have them going to an imagining. This is more Jungian depth work. And these are people who, I'm thinking of a client I worked with and we did this. And I had her go into an imagining of the event that came up. And I went in with her and I said, okay, I'm in here with you and what's happening and this. And then I started helping adjust things. Okay, so we're gonna, yes, you're probably gonna die, but I'm going to have you find your friend and you're going to hold your friend's hand and you're going to tell each other you're not going to die alone. And, you know, creating things, scenarios that created comfort and healing so to release the trauma of what happened. So that was the kind of work I did with some of those people. Mm-hmm. And not typically how I do therapy, but in that format, in that modality, I would do that. So I have this background, this experience of that kind of work. I have the background of working with cards and seeing things. I have a lot of background of working with psychics and hearing what they have to say, a lot of background that we could call witchy. And so at some point, I realized that I was writing about the aspect of reality that people, you know, when I teach the soul collage groups, when I run the soul collage groups, one of the reasons I do it is because people come in saying, I'm not creative and I don't have an intuition or I don't. And I'm like, of course you're creative. Of course you've got an intuition. And as we start making the cards, they start realizing exactly how creative they are and exactly that they can see things that they can see beyond, you know, A plus B equals C. And so the whole cauldron, we'll use the word, is filled with all this stuff that consensus reality tends to dismiss. And it's really valuable, important qualities. And that's when I decided that I would take this word witch and stand it up and make it a more okay, like a valuable word instead of this caricatures of these evil hags with no teeth and, you know, throwing frogs into a pot, which is, you know, utterly ridiculous.
Yes. That's fabulous. Yeah, that makes lots of sense. And I'm curious, as you were speaking, do you think, so when you're with people, you made reference to something like this a little while ago, when you're working with people, like, so you're responding to what is useful, what they're yearning for, whether they know it or not, and making choices about how you are with them based on your intuitive sense of, or whatever sense of what they need. And so some people who you were working with think that you believed past lives because they believed, and other people you were more comfortable letting them know that to you it wasn't important whether it was an actual past life or not. And is that am I right about that?
No. Just in the sense that I let everyone know it was an inner story that may or may not have been a past life. And that they got to decide for themselves.
I was actually hoping that
it's an inner story and you get to decide for yourself whether this is a past life or not. I'm not making that decision for you. Yeah.
And yeah, I get it. And were there people who you bumped into who didn't want to work with you because they sensed that you were not necessarily a believer in the way that they needed somebody to believe?
Yes and no. So the no part is most of the people I'm a master at adapting to what a person needs. And so they don't know where I fit outside of their box, is how I put it. However, there's a funny story here. I'll just tell it really quickly. So when we were at the Saturday Center, one of the guys was sort of pursuing me, not romantically, but pursuing me as a friend because, he admired some of how I was. And when I told him I was doing the soul memory discovery work, he ran for the hills. I don't think I ever talked to him again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's fine. It didn't fit into his paradigm of reality.
Yeah. I bring this up because this is particularly interesting to me because I've been paying a lot of attention to debates, both actual face-to-face people and in text, between people who are religious in the sense of adhering to a text, whether it's the Bible or the Quran or whatever, and those who are religious in the sense that they are absolutely certain that there is no such thing as God. They both seem to hold,
Yeah.
or many of them, right? They hold so tightly onto their belief. That's, for me, that's the religious part.
Yes.
The particular content of their
The
beliefs is irrelevant.
Exactly.
But then there are those people engaged in that conversation that who are wrestling with the questions that sit underneath all of that stuff,
Right.
and not they don't have to wrestle it to the mat, right? They value this or they value that. They're not certain in that sort of desperate way that
they don't have to have they don't have to have it all in a neat tied little box.
Yes. And when they have to, boy, they have to.
Right. And that's
become so wretched.
It's a real limitation.
Yeah. It's so much of what's going on in our world right now.
Right. It is.
It's really just, it feels like, there are many religious camps. Some are religiously democratic or progressive, and some are religiously, Republican or Trumpian or something like that. And it's really just like it's the warring religions.
Yeah. It's,
wow.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I periodically think about WeConcile and its goal. I'm wondering if aspects of that can work with people who are, family members who are sitting across the table at Thanksgiving who can't be in the room with each other because you voted for Trump and you didn't.
Right. Well, it can, because it's dealing with all that the rigidity and getting below the defenses into the fears and the vulnerability, because as soon as you're pointing your finger at someone, there's no vulnerability there at all. You're not in touch with the part of you that's afraid, or if I'm wrong, what does that mean? If I'm right, what does that mean? And all of that.
When we used to be able, I think we used to be able to say that people who lean in the liberal direction are more open to doing what you just said, and people who lean in the other direction are not. But I'm not sure you can say that anymore.
I'm not sure you can either, but there used to be there's research on the difference of the brain differences between Republicans and Democrats, but it's a different world now.
No, it's really feels like
and also with the amount of change that's happening, there's a level of desperation that's driving things. And if you just believe in what you see, reality as you see it, man, you're in a bad place, because we're watching it end.
Well, and what you see is so now dependent on so many things that you have no control of, where everybody's, unless people are actively looking to hear, see, think about things that they don't hear, see, think about, or believe, then they are going to live in the bubble of what comes at them. And somebody's putting that together, whether it's an algorithm or a person.
I know. And it's definitely, don't believe everything you read kind of.
Oh my God,
if you don't open into more perspectives, you are in such a limited reality. It's a real, it's yikes.
So how are you going to get people to both read your book and do WeConcile?
Well, we're going to find out, aren't we? I'm thinking that WeConcile is going to go more. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know that, I have someone who's a possible publisher, but I mean, a possible agent, which I won't know till probably the end of January. They have to actually read the whole book and tell me. And then if I do get that, if it does happen, then there'll have to be a publisher they'll find for me. But some of this is about we never know what's going to happen. We just put it out there and trust that, do our best.
Are you actively seeking marketers or things like that to, like, for instance, WeConcile, right? It's software, right? Might be the best thing in the world, but if nobody ever hears about it.
Right now we're just building social media.
Yeah.
We're using Instagram right now we have someone who's doing social media for just started in the book and is also doing WeConcile, and we'll see what happens. Some of Mike thinks it'll be word of mouth. I don't know, how this stuff happens.
Do you see an overlap between those two large projects that you have been so involved in?
There's definitely an overlap.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you want me to say more about that?
Yeah, can you say it? Yeah.
I don't know if I can, but I'll try. Well, WeConcile grew out of my personal experience of my personal struggle to become relational. I'm barking for a second.
It's how we know we're living in the 21st century.
It means there's a delivery and the dogs are so excited to see what might be coming. But WeConcile grew out of, so I got divorced in 2007, and WeConcile, the idea came to me later in 2007, where I'm like, and I had a lot of couples coming to me who, oh my God, they didn't know A plus B equals C in terms of relationships, much less sentences and paragraphs, much less a whole, piece of, so I was like, oh my God, these people have no skill. And, and so I started doing a lot more couples training, because you don't just learn couples stuff. You have to actually, there's some people out there that figured out some major things, and that learning is available. So you do it. So that was, WeConcile comes out of my own struggle to become relational. Mm-hmm. And because I grew up in a very non-relational family, or a relationally problematic family. And then the book comes out of my journey to find myself, and they're just different. They're two different, there's definitely a relationship.
The Venn diagrams definitely connect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they're different, but we could all have we all have so many parts that we could do, 20 projects, and they can all be integral to our being, but different.
And speaking
of, I'm sure you know.
So yes, indeed. So well, I think I know how you'll respond to this. I mean, I really love your take on things that are invisible. Mm-hmm. That maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but that's beside it's the what you do with them. And so we've known each other for a while, tangentially perhaps, but and sometimes mediated through our others, but and I remember, I think our first conversation was you were talking about our charts, Shelley and my astrological charts.
Yes.
And of course, me, it's like, what? And is that still a piece of your life? Or does
it's peripheral? It's peripheral, but it's there. I mean, I learned, I did the reading, I studied astrology for a while, and I read very specifically depth astrologers. So we aren't talking about Pluto. We're talking about Pluto as a transformer. We're not talking about Venus. We're getting into the, what is the relationship between Saturn and Pluto? Like what does the gritty, putting your nose to the grind, how does that relate to transformation? I mean, these, we're talking about relationships of big energies. So we're looking at big energies, and the planets are just pinpoints, like touch points to a big energy, to understanding a big energy. The planet might be meaningless. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Like, so astrology, if I had I don't have time to do all this. I have to be 10 me's. So, astrology, once in a while I look at it and see what's going on, but it's not, or I look at, I was doing it more back when I looked at your and Shelley's charts, and I think I saw mostly good things. And just so you know, I saw harmony, a lot of harmony. And I know you've had astrological readings since then via Shelley's hiring people. And
oh gosh, no, it actually came from, yes, we did, but it actually came from me. I told her about,
you.
not because I sought it out, but the one board that I'm on, the people who are on that board believe deeply in those things, and suddenly we're sitting in an astrological reading, and I was like, what? What? My eyes were rolling so fast and far back in my head, like, really? But I told Shelley about it, and of course she made an appointment for us.
And did you like that appointment?
I like, yes, but my go-to place is that, look, there are people who are clearly intuitive in ways that are mysterious, and maybe, and just like you said a little while ago, I mean, it's a yes, this, oh, that's interesting, or no, that has nothing to do with us. It sort of, I walk into it that way, but there are people who are sensitive to things and insightful, and this person said some interesting things that she related it to a planet or to aliens or to like whatever. Is like, I'm not there and I don't need to be there.
No, you don't. You just need to that's her touch point. You just need to take the information and go, how does that affect me? Can I make that into something that's a positive influence?
Yeah.
Not.
Right. Or is it just,
riffraff?
Somebody, well, that's that thing, you're right. I mean, like, everybody who's alive has stuff to work on, I figure, right? And nobody's a complete package yet. And so you never know if you're getting some of their stuff or some of your stuff.
You always get some of the reader's stuff.
Yeah.
There's no way around that. That's intersubjectivity. I mean, that's the whole, but the thing is to develop your own ability to enough of a degree that you can see through some of that.
So I want to ask you, but I don't know if it's the right place on a podcast.
Oh, go for it.
But I want to ask you, what are you wrestling with
right now in my life?
Yes, not the projects. I mean, obviously.
I mean, personally.
Yeah. What, like, well, whether it's personal or larger than that. What are you? Well, I don't mean what keeps you up at night, but what's the juicy thing that you see on your horizon? I mean, here, you wrote a book about your journey. Your journey's clearly not over. And so what's out there for you?
So because I'm on the cusp of these two projects going out into the world, they are pretty all-consuming right now. I'm not in the cycle where I'm looking at the new what's next, although I am building my own card deck that will speak a different language than the traditional card deck, because I want to use it. So that is on, but
but that's a project that it's going to have a thing, right? That's a project that, I mean, there's a product there.
Oh, possibly, if I ever do anything with it.
But what are you wrestling with?
Oh, okay. So what I'm wrestling with is watching, it's the contrast between my beautiful, like, I live in a beautiful spot. You guys do too. And yet I know there's millions of migrants who are trying to get out of horrible situations and drowning and getting imprisoned and being murdered, and the political situation, and people are trying to escape climate change that's making them starve, or political situations that are killing them. So I live in this beautiful, amazing piece of perfection, and I'm surrounded by knowing and images of all, the oak trees in California are dying. The the species are, the diversity of species is going down at an alarming rate. I mean, so we're in this world where physical reality in some ways is collapsing. And so it's this weird juxtaposition of, being with utter chaos and pain, because people who are, obviously trying to migrate are in incredible pain, or they wouldn't take the risks they would take. And being, in a place where like, oh, look right now, the big, beautiful gray sky and the mountains and the water and the grass and it's a really weird juxtaposition. And on top of it, personally, I have a husband who's 13 years older than me, and he has muscular dystrophy. So he's aging, he's losing use. He'll be in a wheelchair in 2 years for sure. And, that's doesn't affect how I feel about him, but it's hard. It's not, it's there that I'm, with someone who's diminishing physically. And that of course brings death right into the doorway and all that. And so it's a big, life is a big mix of, contrast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wouldn't say it's a struggle so much as a witnessing. I mean, there's nothing to fight against, but it's a witnessing and an experiencing of what it is.
Yeah. All of those things. And it's something comes out of, well, you never know what it is, but I mean, I tend to believe that if you work with something enough, something comes out of it. And sometimes sometimes you can predict it and sometimes you can't, but
right.
So
yeah. So
yeah. Well, what do you want to make sure we talk about? I have a question for you. What is it that you think? Here's a question. This may just end up on the cutting room floor, but what about what you talk about, what you think about, what you have been speaking about, do you think I don't believe?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. Well, I know that, because I know Shelley well, that you can be an eye roller.
I am an eye roller.
That you're an eye roller. And we could talk about that part of you and what that part of you is protecting if you really wanted to get into it. Because that part of you is covering over another part of you who doesn't want to deal with something.
But I enjoy eye rolling.
Well, you do enjoy it. It's a part of you that enjoys it, but there's also it's
doesn't it depend? Excuse me.
Well, this is where we get into something related.
Doesn't it depend what I roll my eyes about?
Yes and no, because you enjoy it, and you enjoy it in relation to someone who it might create discomfort in, frustration in. So what's going on with the relational piece there?
Yeah.
Just a question.
You mean my relation?
No, I mean, yes. I mean, you are, so the enjoyment of the eye rolling supersedes the discomfort it creates. That's a relational piece. And I'm asking you about that.
Yeah. I think for some people, they enjoy eye rolling as well. They enjoy my eye rolling as well, because it's almost like a circus act rather than it is.
What about the people that don't enjoy it?
Well, I try not to do it if they don't enjoy it. I mean, I try. It's not like if I know somebody doesn't, really takes it seriously, or, I mean, then I certainly don't go out of my way to hurt somebody's feelings.
So in other words, it's a piece of, you're in a sense entertaining somebody.
Yes, that's it. That's how
so that's the entertainer.
Yes, that's how I see it. That if I get an inkling that somebody doesn't, that they really are feeling dismissed, I would try not to do it unless I really want to dismiss, in which case I would probably be much more explicit about it, because I mean, there are lots of things I don't want to dismiss. It's just, I don't care about it or whatever. But if they feel dismissed, I certainly don't want to go out of my way to make somebody feel that way.
Okay.
And are you telling me something?
No, just checking in. But anyway, back to the question. That was a good just interesting because I knew you had an eye roller part.
Oh God, yeah, it's fun. It's so fun.
Well, it can be fun, but I think
Yeah.
it can also, Mike is a part too that makes jokes, likes to make jokes, but there's a defensive element to it. The defensive element is that if he makes a joke, he's not really feeling whatever it is that's really going on underneath. And there is, so he learned as a kid to entertain, to keep, his mother was very depressed. If he entertained, he could get people out of that depressive place.
Mhm.
So there's these things, there's reasons for them, especially when, and not that they're all bad, they're not, but they
Oh,
also,
sure.
but
Right.
they have functions. And if you can get into what's the function of that and what
Yeah.
is below that, you learn more.
Yeah. I think that piece, I believe. I mean, I would agree with that. You learn more, and usually it's better to know more than not. So
It's
good.
almost, yeah, often. But anyway, the original question was what part,
What
say,
is it? Yeah. What is it that you either have spoken about or not spoken about that you think I don't believe?
I, from what I've gathered over the year, what did you used to call me when you first met me? Crazy. What was it? Crazy. You had a nickname.
I know, but I don't. I was trying to remember that as well. But
It was something crazy.
it was something that it was in the family of crazy,
It
but
was
I
in the
don't think it
family of
was the
crazy.
crazy. I don't think the word crazy.
And I'm
Although,
not, I mean,
was it the lunatic? Maybe it was the
a
lunatic.
lunatic.
The
It was a
lunatic.
lunatic. And, I'm very curious where that even came from. Like
Uh,
why you perceived me in that way.
because you spoke about things that were invisible, and you were, at least at the time, you you seemed to be much more. Um, it was not obvious that there was the possibility that these might be metaphorical. It was you were talking about things or that were there, right? That were there,
Right.
and 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 it was fun. I
It
mean,
was fun. Always
it
fun.
was
I didn't,
super fun. So
no, it didn't
lunatic
hurt
was
my feelings in the
no.
slightest.
I
However,
didn't think it hurt your feelings.
but from that colors my perception of what you do not accept or see as real.
Yeah, yeah,
So I would say the part of you that has relied on logic for much of, the part of you that's logical. And I know that you're way more than just logical,
yeah.
but the part of you that has shied away from astrology or, soul memory discovery or all those things that really get into, are there other, do we have spirit guides? Are there other beings? Is the North Star have an energy? Like, is it alive? These other things that are possibilities. The part of you that's sort of put down the steel wall that said no.
No,
Maybe you aren't like that. I'm not sure.
actually, there's not a part of me that has a steel wall that says no. There is a part of me that that I have less patience for. I think this is true. I trust more. Um, uh, Look, we all rest weight on something, on lots of things, right? There's no there's so little and maybe no certainty about anything. So we're all resting weight on certain things. And the way I've sort of puzzled it out over the years, when I'm trying to figure something out about what's going on here, the the fewer the fewer leaps of faith that I have to take in to get to an explanation, I tend to rest weight on those. So when an explanation requires a belief in something that, well, I've never seen and no one else can show, I was like, that's I rest far less weight there. And but I don't think, well, it's like in the sciences where they say, well, okay, ignoring friction for a moment, right? Or
Right.
let's figure this. So there are things about which I think, look, the answers are much more immediate and much simpler and require much less complex, whatever. Could be wrong, but so I have less patience for it. But in terms of, my hands are held like this, in terms of like holding something in my palms to consider it, there is not, I mean, there are some things that probably just don't seem like it's worth the time to me to consider it, but to take seriously almost anything.
Okay, well, that's
So
good.
that's interesting, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking of two things. One is, but yeah. So I in terms of a core belief of mine is that we always have a choice on what we think or believe, or how we propel ourselves forward. And so at some point I had a conversation with my brother Michael, who is he's the one who went to Stanford. He's an electrical engineer.
Yes. Yeah.
And
We met once.
Yes, we had dinner
Yeah.
together once. And he's lives in the world of logic. He doesn't live in the emotional. He's a little different. Let's just put it that way. So I remember a conversation. I don't remember exactly how it went, but I remember saying, well, I choose to believe this because this, whether I have proof or not, because the belief improves myself or my life.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I chose to believe that, even if there was proof, it hurts my life or hurts me. And I don't mean hurts me in pain. I mean, diminishes me or contracts me in some way. And so one of my core beliefs is, in the process of creating oneself, you find what makes you a bigger, better person, whether there's proof for it or not. And that is what drives me. I don't care so much if there's proof for something or not, if it's going to expand someone. What is more important to me is the expansion, not whether it is a literal, logical, provable reality.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I don't know, you might be right in the same place with me. I don't know. But that has allowed me to bypass all kinds of, and then I always go back to these interesting situations that happened many, centuries ago, which is, people used to think the earth was flat because that's what they could see.
Sure.
And they didn't have the tools to see it differently.
Absolutely.
And so perspectives can always be altered so all these things I believe that are not provable, maybe because we don't yet have the antenna grown or the right microscope or telescope to see it. And if it enlarges my world, and I'm not, completely batshit, I'm going to believe it because I'm on the path of becoming more than I am, and I'm grabbing onto any tool that will help me.
Well, yes, that will help you, but I think I think the tricky thing here, but I think the tricky thing here for many people is how to be discerning about what tools to hold on to when you don't know the result of using that one.
Right.
So there has to be some sort of
experimentation.
And wisdom gained about I'm not sure, clearly some people are less discerning than others, right? And you see them getting into the same sorts of terrible situations again and again and again.
Yeah.
Right. And you want to say, hold on.
Right. Yeah.
Think about this, right? You want to hold something up to their face. It's so crazy. It's crazy to rest weight on that again.
Yes,
right.
That's true. But that person has some inner looking to do. But let's just take another example. So we'll take an astrologer, we'll take a psychic, we'll take I work with a woman weekly right now. I've worked with for a while, who is calls herself a kahuna. She's a Hawaiian, it's a Hawaiian healer, and she has great ability to see into things. Mm-hmm. And she's not always accurate at all, but so, and then we take my brother Michael, who has designed, created hearing aids that work through the bone of the chest, and created things that find minds. And like he's, has abilities that are beyond most people. There's these people in the world with different skill sets. And so by bringing them into my arena, my court, and collaborating or using them in some way, I'm increasing my skill set if I feel they're trustworthy. And if I have enough of a screening ability, I can decide what to take and what to leave behind.
Right. Exactly.
Because, like I emailed my brother, Mike, how do I set up this monitor to this computer? He sends me back this connector to this. I'm like, okay, that's not a skill set I have, but I trust that he's accurate. So I'll probably give it a try. When I talk to this, and when I talk to this psychic person and she says, well, you should write a book, and it resonates. Oh, yeah, I should write a book. And then I wrote a book because she said it, and it went in the right way. Right. So it's in that so we get to be a community of beings that are all different, that support each other and give to each other. Right. And that's part of, and I don't need proof. I just need to.
No, but it's about being discerning about which one of those skills to rest weight on, or which one of those other people's skills to rest. You may never develop those skills,
right?
But that you don't have to, right?
I don't have to.
But you do have to develop. One does have to develop the skill of discerning where to rest weight in a way that is useful, helpful.
Yes. Enlarging.
Enlarging is a great word.
Yes, and you. And for you, I think discernment is probably one of the highest qualities that, I'm sensing that discernment, and I agree, discernment's incredibly important.
No, I know.
And for you, that discernment is a very, very important.
I think that's true. I think it's because but my core belief is that it's so certainty is really hard to come by, and probably. And anybody who tells me that it's, oh no, there's lots of things we absolutely know for sure. They're like, well, they don't understand science, or they don't understand intuition, or they don't understand because just what you pointed at before. I mean, look how much has changed.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of this pandemic where there are, huge numbers of people who mistrust what comes out of certain people's mouths because, well, at first they said masks don't mean anything and that they don't work, and then they said they do work, and now they're saying they're less effective, and it's like that, they're just making stuff up to control. So hold on, there's a process that you don't understand.
Right.
They learn something and then they change their minds, and then they learn that they were wrong about something, and they
right. That's true. Yeah. And that whole thing, the pandemic brings up a lot of complexity because we're dealing with science, with what we do know, with what we don't know. We're also dealing with agendas. We're dealing with the fact that, everyone's different. There's a huge complexity, and most people don't do well with complexity. I think complexity is really hard for the human. And so you have to learn how to hold complexity if you're going to navigate effectively through what's going on right now.
That's funny. That's actually very funny, because I think I could be remembering this. I could be making this up entirely, but I don't think so. I think that was many years ago when we had that first conversation in the basement off room of your house in Topanga, when you were talking astrologer and I was saying, what a lunatic. It was a conversation. We ended up in a conversation about how many things we juggle, right? How many things because we have to juggle so many, and we do.
Yeah.
And I remember that being incredibly enjoyable.
Oh, you do?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Maybe you don't. I thought we had a good time.
No, I thought we had a good time too. I did. I thought we had a good time too.
Just like I think we're having. I think we've had a good time here.
Yeah.
What else do you want to talk about before we say this is a good place to stop?
I think I want to say a little bit more about the witch.
Yeah, great, okay. Wonderful. Yeah. Yes, please.
So,
you mean about the book or about the idea of?
I think I'm going to say a little bit more about the book. and the idea. I think they're intertwined.
Great.
So because it turned out to be a story about becoming and using using intuition and healing and the what I would call the non-logical part of reality. And and it's got poems in it, like incantations, like words put together that have an impact, that hit you. And I also have a piece in with past life, like, and this is where inner story, we'll call it an inner story, where something happened and how the inner story informs a current belief. So, if you were stoned to death for being a healer or having visions, and you were too far outside the box and you got stoned to death, you might decide as you were dying that you were bad and you weren't going to do that anymore. And you could suppress again. Right. And you could suppress you can end up suppressing that part of yourself. Well, I've spent years being afraid to talk about the part of me that was highly intuitive. And I tie it to that inner story because it gives me an explanation of why someone wouldn't want to be judged, because being judged in this world can be dangerous. Not in my current life. No one's going to stone me to death. I'm fine. I can say whatever the hell I want to say. But in another life or another time, space, reality, or in that inner story, it wasn't safe. And so, so I just want to say part of the, and then I have a piece in a Wikipedia piece about death by burning, what actually happens to the body when you're burnt. And it is gruesome. Oh. So, this is what people do to people or have done historically. And believe me, it's not over. We're still all people and there's still shit happening out there. And so really try to create a space where people get to step into some part of themselves that they've denied, because there's this shadow, or this, I don't know what the word is, over showing this part of yourself because it's dangerous. And that is, I think, part of what the point of the book is, to help people reclaim an important part of themselves. Because without the part, if we just stay in the logical, linear part, we're missing so much possibility about, if you commune with a tree, for instance, you're not going to chop it down. You're not going to, the part of the person that, the profit over person, profit over earth, profit over forest, whatever, it can't get a hold on, because the part of the person that's alive connects to that as another being. And so it's allowing, wanting to open up space so people can develop that part of themselves or own that part of themselves, and help shift some of what happens because we're so unconscious and cut off from that part of ourselves. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think people, do you think there are people who, I mean, I recognize we live in a world that values, well, I'm going to take that whole thing back. One of the things the world values is what you would call, or what you've been calling, logical or linear. But not everybody and not always. And do you think there are people who, and obviously I'm not going to past lives, who are disinclined to develop that aspect of themselves because, at least in their circles, they've been given the message that it's dangerous and wrong, and that that's not the way to think about things, and that if you say that, I mean, I frequently used to think that, one of the most important things we can all do at this time is to speak truthfully, not harshly, and not inappropriately because we don't want to hurt somebody, but to speak the truth, what you see about it. I think it's so important. And I think sometimes people are reluctant for so many different reasons.
Mostly fear.
Mostly, well, yes,
but
fear of that.
Yeah, it's scary to be judged. It's scary to talk about, to show who you are. And I mean, I think that's a really hard thing. And I do think being truthful is really important, which is why I wrote the book, because it's me showing myself. I'm like, okay, I'm coming out of the closet.
Yeah.
Basically. I
Yeah.
can say I've got a part of me that's a witch, and, in a non-pejorative way. So,
Mhm.
because of what we've done to, you know, to people and to the world, and how we use judgment and how we box people in. And I mean, look, you can't even be I mean, look at the still amount of racism going on. You don't even get to be a Black person in half the country and be okay. I mean, it's ridiculous. And let's talk about therapy just for an example. So therapy is a method of inquiry. It's a relational inquiry where one person is using their skill set to help another person inquire into themselves and develop more facilities. And yet, what percentage of people, at least maybe on the coast, it's not so bad, but in the inner, there's many, 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 many people who wouldn't be caught dead in a therapist's office.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I also think it's that and I'll speak for me, it was not until, well, no, it was not until long after I met my wife that that I even considered that therapy was an unwinding
Yeah,
or potentially, or a thinking through with
right,
somebody who is simply skilled at thinking through
right.
and not, I mean, I grew up with the sense like, well, you go to a doctor because you've got a broken this, and you go to a therapist because you got a broken that. And it was about fixing. It was about fixing something in that.
And there's shame in that.
Yes, exactly. Right. This is either broken or wrong or twisted or mistaken in some
Yeah,
bigger way.
it's bad.
And, but the idea of therapy as an exploration, I don't think that idea I don't think that idea is as widespread as therapists often think it is.
Right. And because we live in our own little insular therapist world, but let's just bring Shelley in for just a minute. So Shelley has an exquisite sensitivity.
Yeah, it's amazing.
She has a tuning in to the body and the intuition that is beyond, she's in the top 0.0001%. Very, very tuned in. And to sit with someone like that is a gift, because they will help you tune into yourself. And it isn't about being broken. It's about, how do I become more than I am?
Right.
That's the
Yeah. Or how do I understand what I am? I mean, right.
Right. And as soon as you start framing things, again, we're framing things. I don't have any proof about Shelley. I just know it. I'm going to go with my knowing. Right. Sure. And I'm going to make this statement as a statement that will improve my life or someone else's life, as opposed to, oh, it's bad, you shouldn't do it. Because then what are you doing? You're contracting. You're contracting into shame, into limitation. And that's where I go back to my point of it. Is what you're doing and saying and thinking expanding you or contracting you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I applaud. I'm applauding. And I'm feeling very expanded by this conversation.
Are you? Oh, thank you.
No, I really have enjoyed.
No, I've enjoyed it too. It's been great. We're really fun talking to you. Yeah.
Super fun.
I thought it would be fun.
So yes, me too. Because you're a lunatic. Come on.
I am, and you're an anti-lunatic. You're your own kind of a lunatic.
Total.